Okay, so my full name's Grafton Eliason, Dr. Eliason, but we're all adults. Call me Grafton. I really don't want to have to call you Mr., Ms., whoever. Um, so Grafton's fine. If you don't feel comfortable with that, you can call me Dr. Eliason. Don't call me Dr. Grafton. That's like calling somebody Dr. Bob or something like that. So I just got this class last week to teach, and I've actually never taught it before because the people who did teach it, they really wanted to teach it. So I let them. But I am an expert in crisis and trauma. So I'm using the syllabus that the department sent to KCREP, basically. So it's a standardized syllabus. So as the semester goes on, I hope to, kind of make it my own, cater it to what I think will best meet your needs. So we may make some changes, but, they'll always be in advanced. Hopefully, they're never going to be harder. You're never going to have more to do. But hopefully we'll be able to make it more applicable to our counseling experiences. So let's see. Thinking about what we should talk about first, since I want to record the important things. The get to know you part, I'm not going to record. So I guess I'll tell you a little bit about myself, but a lot of you who are in face-to-face know me already, and you know my background, but you probably don't know a lot of my experience with crisis or trauma because I haven't really shared a lot about that. So I'll tell you a little bit about that. And what my hope is, I had to learn a lot about how to treat or how to deal with people in crisis, how to help them in specific situations, how to treat them for trauma after the fact, all the various kinds of trauma. And I learned that gradually throughout my career as a counselor. In my master's degree, they only touched upon these subjects, and even one class, is probably not enough. You'll probably have to go on to get some more experience and more supervision and things like that. So when I guess my first experience was when I was in my internship, when I was in my master's class. And my internship was at a school called Scotland School for Veterans Children. And it was a school run by the government where children had lost a parent or guardian due to conflict, if they were in the military, if they had gone to, Vietnam, Korea, something like that, or maybe an accident. Then they sponsored the kids to go to this boarding school. They lived at the school 9 months out of the year. It just turned out that most of the children at the school ended up coming to that school because they weren't in good school districts. They were in areas that did not have a lot of support for their schools. They were in areas where a lot of them were from cities in Pennsylvania, Harrisburg, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and maybe they didn't have as many resources. I don't think it made a difference as far as that, but it was a 99% minority population in the school. And most of them had experienced some type of grief and loss as well. I think that that's the first time in that internship, it was a 2-year internship, that, you know, I had even considered counseling individuals who had traumatic experiences. And at least once a month, one of the children would come to our counseling office, and somebody had either died of a drug overdose or gang violence or died in the military. But there was a lot of grief and loss due to traumatic circumstances. And that was really my first experience with crisis or trauma. And that's also what got me interested in grief and loss as well. And I ended up running grief and loss groups and things like that. And after I graduated in December, so it was hard to find a school counseling job. So I went into a private practice in a very small town where I grew up, Chambersburg, PA. It's in central PA. And I was the only male therapist in that little town. And everybody else in the practice were female therapists. And they had many years experience, and they gave me a lot of extra time and supervision. One thing, I had gone into that practice thinking that I would see a large variety of individuals with all different interests. But what there seemed to be a need for was a male therapist who could see children who had experienced trauma and abuse, whether that abuse was emotional, physical, or sexual, whether they were in foster care or referred by a court. And so I was the only one. And once again, I was not an expert in that, but I received extra supervision from the other counselors in that practice for many years. And at first I was really apprehensive because I thought that it would take an emotional toll on me. I didn't know I could handle that population. Number one, usually people under 18, young children who had been abused seriously in some way. But one of the things that we're going to talk about in this class is if you go into counseling or clinical mental health or even school counseling, and your focus is, you know, a population who's experienced trauma, abuse, crisis, one of the things we're going to talk about is how to avoid burnout and how not to take some of that home with you. There's some very specific techniques, like self-care is, you know, it's not, you know, reading a book, taking a bath, and, you know, doing your favorite thing. That's really not what self-care is. There are very specific things that you're going to need to do in order to deal with these emotional issues that you'll be dealing with as a counselor of people who have experienced trauma. So I know through the program, I always hear people talking about self-care, and they're like, well, I need to take care of myself. I need to meditate. I need to maybe take a bath or burn some incense or something. None of that's going to work when you're dealing with hours and hours of patients who have experienced serious abuse. So we'll get into that. We'll have a whole class just on that. then I finally did find a job as a school counselor. And, I think one of the reasons I found that job was because of all the experience I had gained with grief, loss, abuse issues, working with children and youth. And I made some good connections as a school counselor with all of the local agencies, and we worked together well whenever there were more serious cases in the school as well. After that, I ended up going back to school. And when I was in my doctoral program, one of my good friends, Mark Lepore, who I went to school with, he got me interested in volunteering for the Red Cross. When you volunteer for the Red Cross, you can't just volunteer as a counselor. You have to go through all of the beginning training because you never know what you're going to be asked to do. You'll never know what the emergency situation is. You might be needed to run a shelter. You might be needed to hand out food or to find lodging for people. So you have to go through all the regular training first that everybody in the Red Cross needs to do. And then you can, if you have a license, once you get your LPC, you can focus on counseling in the Red Cross. So psychological care in the Red Cross. And so then I started doing that, and they started calling us, and there were only 3 or 4 of us in the area who had that training. So then we would get called for other types of emergencies, like apartment building fires or things like that. And then we started volunteering on a national level with it's called Reconnections. And this was during the time between kind of Gulf War, Iraq conflict, and Afghanistan. So for about 10 years, we started working with the military. And as they would come back from deployment, the military has the Yellow Ribbon Program, the Red Cross has Reconnections. It's called Reconnections because the military personnel who have been deployed are reconnecting with their friends, their families, their regular working environment, their communities. And it's a very different experience. And of course, as you might guess, many of them have PTSD, but they didn't report it. And so we ran a lot of workshops and groups for individuals in the armed services who were just coming back from deployment overseas and had some pretty rough experiences. So we'll have a class on, PTSD. And one of the problems that I saw, just for example, is that if somebody's in the military, they may experience post-traumatic stress disorder. And now the military has some pretty advanced methods for treating that. And they usually help the armed service members deal with it. The problem is they don't take them off active duty. They send them back into active duty, and then they are re-traumatized. So if you experience traumatization and PTSD 2, 3, 4 times, as you experience that, it becomes more and more difficult to treat. and eventually they begin relying too much on medication. Because of some of these things, I don't want to place all the blame on that, but because of these, we have the highest suicide rates in our nation's history with armed service personnel, and people who are back from the service. And then we got more specialized training. And I remember there's always been shootings of different types. We never really had a lot in Allegheny County or the surrounding area. But the first one I was called to was, I don't know if you'll remember it or not, it was a long time ago, the LA Fitness shooting at the gym. And so we met the victims and their families at the hospital for that. And then later we were called to the Tree of Life shooting, and we met everybody in Squirrel Hill for that one. And things are changing quite a bit for those types of shootings and crises. So I've had a variety of experiences. One of my, I'll tell you some of my personal reasons and experiences. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail right now, but maybe I will later. But growing up, my father was in the military my whole life, his whole life. He served in World War II, Vietnam, Korea. Then he worked for the Pentagon and then the government, all the way past the Gulf War. And I just remember one of our favorite things to do as kids on a Sunday morning was to run in and jump on his bed and read the cartoons. He was always awake when we did that. One time he wasn't, and he threw me across the room. And so with different situations, I saw his reactions. Back then, they didn't have the diagnosis of PTSD. They would call it, shell-shocked or something like that. But most people self-medicated. If you, back then, when you told the military, you were having these psychological problems, even though it wasn't called PTSD, you couldn't go on and get promoted and have a career in the military. So nobody said anything. They just drank. In the Vietnam era, they started using other drugs like morphine and heroin. So that was one reason I not only wanted to deal with trauma, but work with military individuals as well, and help them to reconnect back with their families. Some other things, I've had my own experiences. I didn't realize they were traumatic at the time. If you had me for theories, I told you the story about being in India and, going through this area where there was a lot of fighting and having soldiers screaming at me with AKs, a foot away from my head and all that. I thought I dealt with it pretty well until I was teaching a theories class and one of my students demonstrated EMDR, and it worked. So I thought I was dealing with it pretty well until I realized, hey, treatment's even better. So we're going to talk about a lot of types of treatment and different types of treatment for different age groups. And then we're going to have you do role plays and try some of these things out yourself. So that's a little bit about my history with crisis and trauma. But I'd also like to take some time because there are some cautionary notes that I think I need to bring up. There are a few professions where there is a higher percentage of individuals who go into those professions who have experienced their own trauma or abuse. And counseling is really high on that list. One of the reasons is because people have experienced these negative things in their lives. They've gone to counseling and they have received help. And because this was so helpful to them, they wanted to help others as well. Here's the thing. A lot of times people believe that they have worked through whatever trauma or abuse it was. But then when they have a class like this and we start talking about horrible things, it may bring back some of those memories or uncomfortable experiences. People call it getting triggered. I don't really like that word. It's overused. The other thing is if you begin to see clients and you haven't completely worked through or processed those negative experiences, the usual result is called countertransference. So you begin experiencing those negative emotions again, and you could place them onto the client or believe the client is causing them in you, one or the other. And that's not appropriate. So, you know, the saying, you can't help a client until you've helped yourself. You know, the first way to help a client is for each of us to be healthy as well. Yeah.
So like, regarding the you did experience something that was traumatic, and like you experienced whatever you see that, and you said to a client like did this experience make you feel any, like, for example, this, would you say that's still countertransference, or is that still just trying to like bring out emotions?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say that. I don't ask a client about an emotion. They need to bring up the emotion themselves. So I don't give a client an option of an emotion. Do you feel this way? I want them to bring up the emotion. I can help them define that emotion, but that's called leading. So I don't want to lead a client in an emotional direction. I want them to come up with it from within themselves. Yeah. So, but to answer your question, no. It would be countertransference if you were feeling that emotion yourself as a counselor. Yes. Yeah. And it happens a lot, you know. So as we move through this class, if we talk about some serious subjects, and none of these subjects are happy, you know, they're all, you know, traumatic. And you know, if you're feeling some way about it, don't just not say anything, you know. I'm not perfect, you know. I might tell a story that's just like a horror movie, and it may be too much. I don't know. Let me know. But you're going to hear horror stories every day. Here's the thing. People in the counseling profession often use the word triggered. But if a counselor is triggered or experiencing countertransference or experiencing emotions when dealing with a client that are a little more intense than the average counselor. That is a sign that whatever your experience is has not been processed fully. And that's a sign to go continue to get counseling yourself. So sometimes you're not aware of it. There are other things that you might experience. It might not be with a client. It might just be in your life in general. Maybe you experience bouts of depression or experiences of anxiety. And you only experience that depression or anxiety after you experience something traumatic. Those may be linked to your previous traumatic experience, and those are also signs that maybe that's not processed fully. So as we move through this class, my goal is not to make you uncomfortable, but some topics are uncomfortable for anybody, you know. But if you begin having these feelings or whatever, we got a free counseling center, you know, you might as well use it. I believe that anybody going into counseling, including myself, can benefit from being a client in counseling. You may find out some things you didn't even realize. I did. And it's good to check in with yourself and as a client every now and then, every few years. It can't hurt. You know, let's see. So I did post the syllabus on D2L, and I emailed it too, but I added one book to it. So like I said, I just received the syllabus this past week. I just got this past week. So as we move through each week, the readings in the book aren't going to change or anything. And the book they picked out is a pretty rare textbook. It's new. And I was trying to contact the author, and the author died this year at a very young age. And I'm like, wow, that's dramatic. But, you know, I could, so there's no PowerPoints that I could post for you, or you know, sometimes they provide like videos or things like that. So I'm going to find them all myself. You know, I'm going to find supplemental readings and videos myself, and I'll post them each week on D2L for you. And it won't be excessive, one or two each week. And so it's only one or two chapters each week. It's not a lot of reading. And then I tried to see if they could get the textbook or if they had already ordered it. And I think because the author passed away, they're getting rid of all the old textbooks and now they're selling ebooks. So you might just be able to download the ebook. It's $10 cheaper. There's also, whoever picked this book, like I always pick books that are like in the 10th edition, so that you can buy like the 6th edition for $5. There's only one edition of this book, so you got to pay the $60. So the book I picked, and maybe you've already read this, but you can read it again, is $10. So my book's a bargain. It's, you know, The Body Keeps Score. Have any of you read that already? Yeah. So we're going to read the book as we read the textbook and learn about this subject. So even if you've read it before, read it again. You may see it in a different light as we move through this course. And we'll probably have in a 15-week course, maybe 10 discussion boards. If there's a project, you won't have a discussion board. So right now, the only thing uploaded is the syllabus, okay? But you can get the Body Keeps score. It's 2-day Amazon, and a brand new book is $10. And you can download the ebook of the textbook and get that pretty quickly. So I don't think the books will be a problem. I think you'll enjoy reading How the Body Keeps score. If you've read it, what did you think about that book?
I read it in undergrad too.
Hey, 3 times is a charm. Anybody else? Okay, so usually the discussion board's going to be simple. I'm never going to ask you about your personal trauma or abuse experiences. That is not a subject of this class. So you don't have to worry about that. Even in role plays, I don't want you to bring up a personal experience. We'll have a case and you'll pretend you're somebody in that case study. I think the only problem might be is if the person in the case study, if their trauma came close to something that you may have experienced, but that's the only glitch I can think of right now, because we're not going to bring up any personal issues of your own. They're all going to be case scenarios that we practice. So the discussion boards, you're just going to give your personal response to the book chapter, to How the Body Keeps score, to that reading, and maybe I'll put up a video, like a documentary, or maybe I'll add a journal article. So you're just going to respond to those 3 things: the textbook, How the Body Keeps score, and the supplemental material. And there's nothing to do this week. I didn't do it yet. I'll do it this weekend. I'm going to put up like introduce yourselves, but that's nothing. Just tell us about yourself. You'll always have till Saturday. I mean, it's already Thursday. So I think the syllabus said Saturday, but I'm just going to give you until the next Wednesday. I think I'm going to change that. So because this is on a Thursday, I'll make all the discussion boards due by the next Wednesday. That'll give you a week to do them. There are some very specific things that KCREP wants you to do, like how to do an assessment, things like that. They want you to role play some case scenarios. So there are some very specific things that can't be changed, and it's because anybody who takes this class from KCREP has to do them. I know that a lot of students, they either look forward to this class or they dread this class. Nothing bad's going to happen in this class. Students look forward to this class if they want to work with a population that's experienced trauma. People don't look forward to this class if maybe they've experienced some trauma and want to stay away from that subject as far as possible. I can understand both those things. Yeah, I think as long as you're not sharing anything personal, I think it's manageable. Let's see what else. Yeah, so this week, all you have to do this weekend, fill out, introduce yourself to the class on the discussion board. I think the other thing I'm going to ask you is, have you had any work experience or volunteer experience with crisis or trauma? Maybe you've worked for a crisis hotline. Maybe you've worked, with Resolve or something like that. So maybe some of you have a lot of experience in this area already. I think one of the most interesting jobs now, some of my old students ask me for references for these new jobs. And the new job is riding along with police officers as counseling professionals. You do need a license to do that, but the reason is because there's been so much escalation if police encounter individuals with psychological issues. And so it could really help the situation if a counseling professional goes along and is trained in things like de-escalation or something like that, or they can recognize a diagnosis like schizophrenia or something like that. A few years ago, I took some students to Belize and we trained the police academy in Belize with all types of counseling methods, how to talk to somebody who is suicidal, somebody's on a bridge, how to talk them off the bridge, if somebody is anxious or aggressive, how to de-escalate the situation, how to identify different diagnoses and what kind of things might be portrayed in that individual, things like that. So we spent almost a week with them, and I thought it was pretty advanced for Belize to invite us down. A lot of our own police departments don't have training in that, but more are getting it, which is good. All right, so before we kind of do our little get to know activity, and I'll stop recording for that, but questions about what to expect in this class. Like some of the professors give exams, but I guess I better tell you, if we call them exams, they're open book take home. You got a week to do them, it's not like an in-class exam. And my goal is for you to know the material. So if you blow the exam or paper or whatever, or video, the worst thing that could happen is I ask you to do it again. So it's called mastery learning. I'd rather have you learn the material than fail or get a B in the class. I wish all of our counseling classes were pass fail because, in my mind, students are either ready to be with a client or they're not, at least for practicum or internship. So that's our goal. So I don't think you'll have to worry too much about that kind of academic stress. Some of the papers might take you a while to write, but if it's like, how do you deal with this case? You got to be kind of thorough about it, but it's not the same kind of stress as memorizing something and sitting in class taking a test. And it is a multimodal class, which is kind of strange because I feel a little torn. I like looking at the people on screen. I like looking at the people in class. So I feel kind of torn between the two worlds. I'm used to either teaching in person or totally online. So this is kind of a halfway in between. All right, so any questions? I think the only thing is, you know, do the discussion board, and then you can look at the syllabus, and when you get the books, you know, I'm gonna add what to read for How the Body Keeps Score to it, but the chapters to read are already in the syllabus for the textbook. So you just read them, you know, for next week, whenever you get it. We're still not gonna have an assignment due for a few weeks, so you've got time to catch up if you need to.
Do you know how to get like my one class? I got the book off of that website, the Vital, like the new one. Do you know how to like get like your book on there too? Is there you have to add it or
Um, I thought it would have been added.
yeah, so did I, and I didn't see it.
So like supposedly, you know, whoever prepped this class was supposed to add the book. But I'll see if I can add it.
Okay. Yeah, because I have the one, but I'm not seeing yours. I don't know, maybe I have to go to the store and look for it.
Well, I mean, they're gonna charge you for that website, so
Yeah.
you might as well use it.
Yeah.
So tomorrow is Friday, so I have time to talk with them. They'll be in the office. But you know, look for it next week if they're able to do it. If they're not able to do it, I'll email you.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
What else? Yeah, I just assumed that it was already on that website.
Yeah, I don't know. I had to like hit on the other one, like open in a new window and like create the account, and that one's on there, but yeah, yours isn't. I don't know. I
Is,
can figure
is
it
the
out.
other class using a different book?
Yes.
See, everybody's supposed to be using the same book. So that's another issue. Um, do you know what the other, can you do me a favor and just email me what that other book is that they do have?
That's like already like on there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
sure.
Because what I could do is, I'm sure both the books have the same chapters, so I could put both books on the syllabus so you could get either one,
Okay.
you know? So I'd be
Okay.
happy to do that.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think classes are supposed to use the same book, so I don't care if I add that to mine or not.
Well, it would be a different book because it's like I'm taking ethics, so it's like the ethic book.
Oh, I thought you meant for the other crisis class.
No, no, like yours specifically. Like I have my other classes on there, but yours, like it's not on there. For I don't. Maybe I need to search it. I'm not sure. I'll play around with it though.
It's probably not on there.
Okay.
Figure it out. Yeah, so I don't need to know the ethics book.
No. Yeah, I just need yours.
All right, well, let's take a 10-minute break, then we'll come back and introduce ourselves to each other. So come back at 5 after.